Welcome, everyone. Okay, so welcome to the second webinar in EF Teacher Zone's Teacher Development course. Today's webinar is going to be all about teaching mixed ability classes. So, I think it's a situation we all face in one way, shape, or form, and it looks quite different, in the different types of schools and like classrooms and everything we encounter. So I hope that today we can chat a little bit about what mixed ability classes look like in the real world and not in textbooks where they kind of try and explain to you what to expect, but they don't really give a lot of practical tools that makes it a bit easier to navigate. And I hope to help you a little bit with what's worked for me and for our teachers in the past. So just a little bit more about me. My name is Mariet, and I am from Cape Town. I'm currently the head teacher at EF Cape Town, and I have about 10 years of experience in teaching and about 8 years of experience in ESL specifically. I see that someone raised. Okay. Are we all good? So, as I was saying, I have about 10 years of experience in teaching and teaching very, very diverse contexts. Multinational learners, 3 different countries, all different kinds of settings, high schools, universities, ESL classrooms, to adults, to teenagers, to kids. Um, it's been a joy, really, just a most wonderful career that I feel so privileged to have. I've also been a language teacher trainer in South Africa and Canada. And I think my teacher training is focused on practical and sustainable ways to just teach in the very, very different contexts we encounter like on a daily basis in our jobs, It's something I feel very passionate about because I think like being a teacher is an absolute calling. And, I've been in situations where everything around the teaching, like the admin and the structures in the school and the way you have to do the grading and things like that just become so overwhelming sometimes that you don't actually enjoy it anymore. You get so overwhelmed with what's going on around it that the actual teaching fades away a little bit, and that's not great. That's not what you want. So I to me it's always just been easier when I have things that help me remember the teaching and remember the joy of teaching, and that makes it fun and engaging and dynamic in class. So I hope that I can share a little bit of what I do in these mixed ability classes with you today. So um, moving on to what I think I'd like to do here, I really want to look at what these classes look like in different contexts, what it means, and how we understand approaching them as teachers. Then I want to share some practical and manageable strategies for effective differentiation. So, how you make something more difficult or more easy depending on what's happening in front of you. And I really want to help you support student engagement and progress across their individual different ability levels with easy ways that can help them see and feel their progress, but that can also help you just feel that you achieved something with them and that you're not stressed out and you feel like you're out of like control and you don't really know how to manage it and everything like that. So to start off with, I would like to know what you think a mixed ability class is. So you can respond in the Zoom chat or you can scan the code to let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this and we can check it out. So I'm getting some answers here. Let's see. Let's have a look at some of these responses. So While I wait for some of these to come in, I'm going to show you what some of our teachers at EF Cape Town says. So Ross says that mixed ability class is a class where students have different knowledge levels, practice patterns, and learning styles. And Kristen says that a mixed level class is a
Hello.
wealth of opportunities for students to learn
وعليكم
from.
السلام كيف حالك؟ أشياء إيه؟
Okay, moving on again. So Kristen says a mixed level class is a wealth of opportunities for students to learn from each other and collaborate on their English journey. Then Aiden said that it's a class that has different strengths and weaknesses and different experiences of learning. And Kirsty said that a mixed ability class is where students are aware of each other's strengths and weaknesses. So don't know if you agree with that. Please let me know. So I can see in the chat here, we have different strengths and weaknesses, different levels of knowledge, different needs and backgrounds, definitely. Let me share the Mentimeter over here. So we can see some of the results coming in from everyone. So students with different needs and CFR level, different levels. Many students have a different experience in education. Okay, very good. Challenges and opportunities experience. A group of students who have different levels of skills, knowledge, and learning. The same or different speeds. Sharing empathy, hardworking. So I definitely agree with that one. Empathy is so important, and you know, people experience it very differently too. So I'm going to move back over here to this side, and I'm going to move on. So when we look at the reality of mixed ability classes, I think we very often think that it's about different language proficiencies in one room. And of course, that's a very, very big part of it. But I think in practice, it goes very far beyond one student being stronger in grammar, for example, and another one just needing a little bit more exercise, or maybe they need to review verbs or something like that. It can also mean differences in confidence, not just ability. So sometimes a learner has the language knowledge, but not the confidence to speak or participate or take risks. Just this week, we had a new student arriving from France, and she's in a very big corporate company. She's the manager of her division in her company, multinational company. So she has to speak to English people quite often, clients, but she's, I'd say, at a pre-intermediate level, and she told me that she's got no problems with confidence. Like, she can do her job and she can do it well. But when she speaks English, her bosses belittle her and they talk down to her. Um, they make it very, very difficult for her to just have the confidence to speak to her clients and tell them what they need to know and make the deal she needs to make, because they are so harsh with her. So she doesn't have confidence in English, but she has in her the rest of her life, and she likes big challenges and tackling things. But yeah, for her, it's just a confidence thing. So it can also show up in faster and slower processing speed. So two students may very well understand the same content, but one may need more thinking time, more repetition, or just generally a slower pace to respond. And we also see a mixed ability in learning habits, educational backgrounds, and participation styles. Some students are used to very structured classrooms. This is something that I find quite a lot when students join our ESL classrooms for the first time, is they are really just not adjusted to the level of active participation they need to give in these classes. You know, they need to volunteer, they need to read out loud, they need to talk to a partner, work independently, figure it out if they don't know. They're not really used to this like lecture style, or they are very used to this lecture style of teaching only. And this is a very big adjustment for them and a challenge, you know, when they need to sort of settle into their new routines. So others are more comfortable with that. And that's difficult to manage if you've got a good mix of that in the class. So I think even students who are like officially at the same level need very different kinds of support sometimes. So some might need a lot of scaffolding specifically in certain concepts, grammar or vocabulary concepts, and others might just need a little bit of confidence boosting, you know. Many of them might just need a bigger challenge to stay stimulated. So when we talk about mixed ability classes today, I'm using the term very, very broadly. I'm not just talking about stronger and weaker English levels. I'm very specifically talking about the real classroom picture. So learners with different needs and speeds and habits and levels of confidence all in the same space at the same time. So when we look at the challenge that this class can present us with, I would like to know what you find the most challenging. So please feel free to share in the Zoom chat, or you can scan the code and let me know. I think I frequently struggle with students who finish faster than they should, but when they have been in that class for a long time. So the things you do at the beginning of the sort of cycle, you know, whether it's 3 months or 2 months or 6 weeks or whatever, you can't necessarily keep using the same techniques and the same tools and strategies to keep them engaged. They, you know, they already need a challenge. They already work fast. They get bored very quickly. So you constantly need to find innovative ways to kind of keep them motivated. So I'm going to move over to the other screen and then we can have a look at what you think about this. So here we have giving individual attention to all students. Definitely. This is very, very hard, especially when you have big class sizes, you know, a lot of them in the same class. Then we have motivation, 100%. I struggle with this quite a lot, especially in the higher levels where students like pretty much know everything, you know, and then they still want to learn. And you're like, okay, but you've kind of learned a lot, you know, keeping them advanced and motivated to just continue. Then we have processing, student concentration, definitely keep them interested. Letting the fast students know that they need to give others a chance, 100%. I find that this is also quite challenging in a class, sometimes with either a big age gap between students. So if we have like students who are like 50 plus years old mixed in with students in their early 20s, sometimes that's a little bit challenging to manage for me, just, you know, because they don't really understand each other that well a lot of the time. Time management is definitely a big thing. You know, because your lesson pace gets affected. So, you know, if some of them are a little bit slower and some are faster, then you have to give attention to the ones who are a little bit slower. And then maybe one asks a question and it opens a whole can of worms. And then, you know, before you know it, you didn't get to half of the stuff you want to cover. So these are all brilliant responses. And I really have to say that I just feel so happy in seeing all of this, because it means we are all faced with the same things all over the world, and we can really help and support each other so much, actually. So I'm going to jump back over here. And I want to talk a little bit about these challenges we face. So I think a lot of the time when we speak to our teachers at school too, you know, it's very much a case of just realizing that we're not doing anything wrong in facing these challenges and experiencing them in class. I think that it's very easy to be quite hard on yourself, you know, when you don't feel like a lesson went as well as it could have, because one's off over there, one's off over there, this guy over here is 2 pages behind. and you don't always know what to do in those situations, before you know it, three of them are on their phones and you've lost them. And it's really hard to feel like you did your job well at the end of the day with those lessons, right? But it's not a case of doing something wrong. I think it's a case of just realizing that there are ways to manage students' time that are very much within your control, and that you things that you can do and apply to keep them engaged, keep them challenged, and support the ones that take a bit longer, and things that are very much out of your control. I think what I've seen in our school is when teachers struggle, I mean, we're so passionate, right? So it's we take it so seriously. If it's your calling, it's your calling. And I mean, today I was explaining gerunds, and to a very low level class, we got into the topic. I don't know how it was supposed to be a vocabulary class. It turned into a little bit of a grammar class. I hope they forgive me, but and it's a complex topic. It's difficult for them to accept that specific topic and the grammar and whatever. But then they got it. I don't know how, but they got it, and I got goosebumps. My whole body, I just got goosebumps, and I was like, this is why I am a teacher. This is why I do what I do. And I think that when we're so passionate about it and we take it so seriously, it's so difficult to disengage when we do have students that don't want to be there mentally. They want to check out, and you do what you can, but sometimes for certain students it's just not enough. And I think that's okay too. You get to a point where you kind of just need to say, you know what, I've done what I know I'm supposed to do, and then it's also in their hands. If they are super fast all the time, but they do the work that they do, but then they sort of lose interest and they become bored and they sit on their phones. But they're an adult that paid for these classes themselves. That's very much up to them, to also do what they're supposed to do, to find a way to participate, to ask you for more stuff instead of sitting there disappearing into the background on their phone or staring out of the window, whatever it is. I think it's very important for me to speak about the fact that we are not responsible for keeping everyone's focus and interest every second of every lesson, every single day. And we can take pride in our work, and we can plan our work, and we can think about all the ways to differentiate. But then, we also can get to a point where we know we did enough. And not take it too much to heart if they, sometimes just don't pay attention, because it is a very complicated environment to operate in at the end of the day. So I think some of the things that we face, that I've mentioned here, can be very easily managed with the right techniques, as I've said. So one of those techniques that I want to look at today is differentiation. So I think I just saw a comment in the chat here. Sorry, I'm interrupting myself now. Preparing the whole lesson plan is time consuming, and sometimes the result is disappointing. And I so know that feeling. It's so disheartening, when you've put so much time and effort into it, and then you leave feeling so flat, and you don't know if it landed or if you got what you got through to them. But I think that, on those days, what works well for me is just saying, like, I did my part, I tried my best, and even if it didn't show today, maybe it will show in a week. When we do a topic that links to this again, we'll see whether it, hit home or not. It's also unrealistic of us to expect that they are hyped up and vibey all the time. I think I saw a comment a little bit earlier that said, like, we can't be passionate all the time. And I agree with that. It's everyone has good days and bad days. The students do too, we also can't expect them to respond to them the way that we want to kind of know if this is going well or not, So stay focused on what you plan to do, and do that. And, try not to think of it too much further if you can. That's just an approach that worked for me. It's obviously not a one size fits all. So yeah, but differentiation really helps me with this so much. So I want to look at that a little bit. Um, so just in terms of differentiation, we stick to the same aim, right? The same principle, the same goal, but we change the support we give them. So if you know we have struggling students, you're going to give them a little bit more scaffolding, a little bit more time. You're going to do what you need to basically to get them there eventually. But what you're going to do with the students who are more independent and who need to be challenged is you're going to remove some of that scaffolding. You're going to give them more advanced tasks, more complex cognitive tasks, so interpreting things, giving reasons for things. This helps them quite a lot. So it's not fragmenting the lesson. It looks different for all of them, but they all get at the end at the same aim, then your goal is achieved, right? So we have these lessons, we have these classes, and we have to accommodate the diversity that we face while not burning out doing it. So we're going to look at how we differentiate functionally. So I think keeping in mind when you have a lesson, changing the support rather than the whole lesson, planning scaffolding with what you have, and allowing stronger learners to work ahead if they need to, work with less support, more independence is fine. It doesn't mean that you're now splitting up the class into different groups necessarily, right? That's just the way to manage it. So sometimes you get these students who really like working independently because they are a little bit faster, and that's fine. You can encourage that because at the end of the day, they'll all come back together at the end of the whole day. So I think just keeping yourself and the class focused on working towards the same broad goal is the best way to kind of think about it in your mind. That, in a functional, practical kind of way without reinventing the wheel, which I do think sometimes happens quite a lot. So when you think about the last time you had to differentiate in a class, did you differentiate the material or did you change the task? I'm really interested in knowing. So please share in the chat or in the Menti, and let's have a look. Let's see here. So the material, okay, change the task, very good, both. The material, the support, depends on the group. I definitely agree with that. Here, the material, the task, adapted the questions, very good. So let's have a look at the Mentimeter over here. Change the task, the material usually, very nice, okay. Broke the task down into easier steps. Okay. All right, different students, different attitudes. Cooperative learning is very helpful. It really, really is. It helps so much. But I also find it depends on the class you have because not all of them are receptive to it, We've had a class where we tried putting together, it was like a special kind of course that we do for them, and we put together higher and lower level students in the same class. It's just a 2-week class. It's a special kind of thing. They don't really follow the same books that the others do. And I think usually if it kind of happens by accident, sometimes it works very well. But this time it just kind of bombed out totally. They just were not receptive to it at all. We learned a lesson there that like it really does depend on the group very, very much. It's never a one size fits all answer. It's hard to put up with misbehaving students, definitely. And that's challenging, because different countries, different contexts, different cultures, different structures. How do you approach it? Like at EF Cape Town, we only have adult students. They're all adults. We have no minors. So, I mean, we kind of joke about this, but if a student is constantly on their phone and they're being a little bit disruptive and not engaged, how do you go to an adult and say, give me your phone, sir? Like if the student is maybe old enough to be your grandfather. It's a little bit of a tricky one to manage, but we get there in the end. So, but it definitely impacts your pace and just the way you can present the tasks. So some new exercises, scaffolding a bit more, very nice. The way you did it. So I think we all have a very sharp idea of how to approach differentiation, and that it will differ depending on the class in front of you and the level you're pitching it at, right? So um, when we look at differentiation specifically, the reason I'm saying this, differentiate the task, not always the content, is because when you have a full teaching schedule, like so many of our teachers do, like I had in almost all the schools where I worked before EF Cape Town, and you work for 6 to 8 hours a day, you're teaching. Differentiating the content is not always sustainable. It's so hard to keep up with getting extra activities and like finding supplementary materials and going up and going down and finding, extra notes for them and all of these kinds of things. It's so hard to keep up with. And when you have the time to do that, it's brilliant. Then of course that helps so much. But to me, differentiating the content and modifying the content sometimes feels like a luxury, that you really don't always have. So my go-to is always the task. So I think when you use the same content, the same topic, the same material, but you just adjust what students have to do with that, it really helps reducing your planning load, and it helps you stay focused in a way that you can develop your awareness of what works and what doesn't work functionally. Um, the whole gerund thing I was talking about a little bit earlier, I think the only way I could realistically explain it to that class in a way that they understood was because a few weeks before that, the topic came up in a higher level class, and I anticipated that they might ask about it because it was in one of the questions. It wasn't the aim, but it was one of the things that one of the answers they did it, and it was a weird thing. So I thought they might notice it. And I thought about how I was going to explain it to them without diverting the class. And it just, I think it worked, but it took such a long time because of the different levels, different grammar backgrounds. Half of them don't understand what it means when you say present participle, So that takes time to explain. But I stayed focused. I knew it was going to come up. I planned for it and I stayed on point. And by sticking to my plan, I could see what worked well in doing it that way and what didn't. So now, when it came up randomly again today in a lower level class, I knew absolutely what to avoid because I didn't clutter up my time in the previous class with having an extra activity sheet that they had to do where we might have to explain even more vocabulary, or where the topic is not this grammar at all. It's actually something else, but they might be interested. It might help them in the future. So I should probably get this ready. When you stay focused on what you have in front of you and you find ways of adapting it and you don't add more, you also make space in your own mind for being engaged and present in what you're doing in that class. You have so much more capacity to deal with what comes up at different times for different people and to think of creative ways to challenge them or support them for what's relevant in that moment, in that class that that's sitting in front of you. But by needing to keep track of a lesson plan that's 10 pages long with this handout and that handout and changing a slide from here to there, there's so much mental clutter that I find it usually leads to misunderstanding the students a lot anyway, which makes it even more complicated than it needs to be. Well, than it already is, So I don't know. I found this quite helpful, this visual, when you think about it, because to me it just adds to the whole feeling of like mental clutter that you can take with you when you feel like you need to keep track of everything. And then sometimes you get home and you realize you never even gave them this thing that you spent like an hour working on, and then you hope you use it again in future, but it just sits in a file, and before long you've forgotten it ever existed. So where did that energy go? When you have one thing to do and different ways of approaching it in a class, it just frees you up to be there. And at the end of the day, to switch off and go home, to leave the work where the work needs to be. So I thought about giving you this example. So this is from, I don't know if you know about the National Geographic Life series of textbooks. They're quite good. I enjoy using them for like just actually seeing how they approach things. So this is available on their website. This little example that I got here, you can just Google it and they'll give you, it's one of the samples they make available to teachers to look at from their upper intermediate series. And the link, yeah, I will ask Eleonora and Michaela how we can get that link to you. Yes. So this is a grammar task. So, sometimes with grammar, it really depends on like what they know and what they don't know. I find when you have a class, like half of them are 30 somethings, 2 or 3 or 40s and 50s, and then some of them are like 18. They're all over the place. Half of them did grammar in high school, but they never really focused. They didn't care. The other half now really seriously need to do English, like very, very, very urgently because they need it for a new job application, but they never did it before. They don't have the vocabulary. They don't know the meta language. They don't know what to do. But now you give them a task where they just have to change the verb. Looks easy enough, literally you have the verb, just change the verb. It's a very simple and straightforward task, but when you just think of the wide variety of different situations that come up, that all the different students and the story each of them has, then it's actually not that simple and straightforward at all. Maybe they can do it, no problem, but it's very likely that there's going to be a multitude of problems with this. So with a lower level student, what I would do with this is if they struggled to complete the task within the time that I allocated to it, I would ask them to find time words, and I would link the time words to the tenses, because it's very likely that they might not understand how these tenses are actually used. They might not understand the present simple is a habit or a routine. It's something that usually happens, right? And the same with the present continuous. So instead of going, let's go to the grammar, like it's, verb plus this and be verb plus verb ing, like just going hard in on the grammar, just telling them, look at the time words connected to the tense, right? So you're giving them extra time because you're giving them more scaffolding. You're explaining to them how to use a different approach in understanding how we use time in English, right? But now you have a higher level student who knows the grammar. They know the tenses. Maybe they did it at school. You don't know, but they flew through this. Everything is correct. So now they're done. The rest are very far behind, if you compare them to this student. So what I would do here, and this is something I'm very much focusing on the current class I have. It's not something I would do for, it's not like a standard thing I would do for everyone. It would very much depend on the class itself. But I would ask them with grammar, why is takes, for example, correct? Why is this answer correct? Why does it need an S? Why would we use this in this situation? What in the sentence tells me that this is the correct verb form? Explain the context to me, right? So that you can broaden their situational and contextual awareness and how we use that in grammar, so that you can help them articulate reasoning why, right? It's a different kind of speaking or writing practice if you make them write it down. They're practicing writing, they're practicing putting a full stop at the end of the sentence, starting it with a capital letter, all of that. You can ask them, what is the difference in meaning when you use present simple and present continuous? How does the meaning change here? How does changing this verb change the whole context of the situation? Or you can just ask them to write one more sentence with the same contrast. If they're really, really strong, just tell them to go for it. No scaffolding, no support. They've got the notes, they've got the activity. Let them go and check for them. Come back to them, because that's how you motivate them. That's how you keep them engaged and keep them focused. It's with feedback, and it's with structuring and supporting them in their mistakes when they work independently, because they're going out on a limb too, when you like, even if they are a high level student, even if they know like they might be the best in the class, it's still a difficult thing, right? Just doing something all on their own. You can't assume that they're just now doing it and writing it and you're quickly checking it for them. You have to kind of try and find some time, whether it's before or after or even the next day. Just make a mental note and in class check that thing they wrote, give them feedback about it, praise them about it, even if it's horribly wrong. Well done on trying, well done on doing this, good on you. You're expanding your English knowledge and you're doing it by yourself, and that alone will propel them forward like you don't even know. Before you know it, they'll start doing this by themselves. You won't need to actively differentiate up for higher students or lower students when you make this a habit and a routine in your classrooms. Um, so it's very much about feedback too. So um, when we move to some of the differentiation tools that I find very useful, the one thing is peer tasks, so the same topic, but different levels of complexity. But I also find that this isn't always applicable to every single type of lesson you can choose, right? Like if you're going to do a reading task and you have a textbook to use, you have to do the reading. You can't give one student an easier reading because they're all doing the same test at the end of the week, right? So where possible, tier tasks. Depends on the class, depends on the topic. But this pyramid is so incredibly helpful to me when I think about what needs to be done. I will live and die by aims for my whole life. They are like the engine of the lesson. They are the focus point. They keep you on track. If you know what your aim is, you can pretty much do anything around that, right? So if you understand within your lesson what is an absolute must, what is the minimum thing that they need to do by the end of this class, then that is your baseline. That's what you come back to. For the slower students, what can you do within the material that you have that leads them to this minimum baseline? But the trick is that this might look different for different students, right? If your task is speak about habits and routines, about the general past, using the past simple. For a stronger student who's advanced, they might be able to tell you a whole story in narrative tenses perfectly. They've achieved that aim. But for a lower level student who struggles, if they can make one sentence, if the production section of your lesson is speaking focused, if they can make one sentence using that grammar correctly, not even 100% grammatically accurate sentence, but if they can use the grammar in the right way, in the right context, your aim is achieved. They do not have, the output does not have to look the same for learners at different levels, right? So I think it's very much about understanding what is a must for the lower levels and what is a must for the higher levels. Your aim is the same, but your requirement will have to be different. We can also move to the should. So this is an expectation, and this is something that for me, when we get to this part, it's like, what would be nice if they could do like a nice add-on to expand, not just the bare minimum, a little bit more, just a little bit more, right? And then when we get to the could part, it's like, okay, that's like the top level for me. That's how far can we push them here in this class? How far can we get there? So for me, the should and the could is optional, depending on the topic, depending on the learner, depending on the class. But you can get through all three phases of this pyramid with a lower level student and a higher level student in the same class. You have to change your understanding of what achieving an aim looks like, to feel that your lesson was successful and to help them see their own progress too. I think frequently what happens is that students don't see their own progress because we don't see it. We don't make it visible because we feel like, this was my aim, but it was such a difficult class today. This guy did this, that guy did that. It got diverted here. We had a can of worms over there. And it's busy. It's really busy. It's all over the place. And at the end of the lesson, you spent so much time prepping and you feel like, oh man, you just kind of wish that your lesson flowed the way you planned it to flow, but then all of these things came up and it's absolutely natural to feel deflated. But sometimes I feel that shows too much, and students don't recognize that they actually did make progress, even if it doesn't look the way we envisioned it when we started our lesson plan, when we started thinking about what we want to do and achieve here today. If the lower level student can make one sentence, that aim is achieved. That student has learned something, that student has produced something. If a higher level student can just carry on, and deliver a whole speech about it, that aim is achieved. We can't have the expectation that the end of the class must look the same for every single student. We can't see that as a failure. We have to praise them and acknowledge them for what they are capable to do and for what they've done. So that's very much a perception shift that needs to happen on our side, and it's very difficult. It's so hard, honestly, because you always, for me, I'm saying you, but I actually mean me, thinking about the test they do on a Monday. And I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm so happy you can make the sentence now, but actually you have a test that's a little bit more difficult than this. Are you going to be okay? I don't know. So there's always this little thing in the back of your mind with will this be okay? Was this enough? But a test is only a test. If that student is here to learn how to communicate effectively, how to communicate well, and in your class they could do that, that aim is achieved. And they can practice more at home. There's a lot of stuff that the student can take responsibility for too at the end of the day. So when we look at practical differentiation tools, those are the two things that's my main focus, but I also have some of these options that I kind of cycle through when and as it's necessary for the different kinds of classes we have. So choice boards, I don't know if you know what they are. I think probably some of you do know, so that they can access the lesson through different kinds of routes. Like you have one topic, you have a reading class, but you have different options available for students. So if you have 10 students, you have maybe 5 options for them, 5 different topics related to the reading. You pair them up, and then this group summarizes the main idea of the task. This group finds the keywords of the task, depending on what their strengths are. So that helps quite frequently, depending on the class, as I always say. Support ladders, so scaffolding, just scaffolding as much as possible, giving them the tools they need, seeing it from their perspective. What will help them when you are not there at the end of the day? And extension tasks prepared in advance. Now, for me, extension tasks is not necessarily more content. Like I said, it's literally something like, give me a sentence explaining why this is the correct answer. If it's an article, like today we had an article on digital detoxing and why it's good for you. Do you agree or disagree and why? Write me a 10-sentence paragraph explaining your opinion. just extending it in that way, but thinking of these things beforehand, because you know when you see them in front of you like that and they're going through the tasks and suddenly there's like you see two of them over there are chit-chatting, they're on their phone, whatever, you've lost them. Then this guy, it always all happens at the same time. I don't know if that's your experience. To me, that always feels like the way it happens. The moment you notice those guys going off on their own little tangent, then this guy over here is just has 7 questions for you, and then you're like, I just want to give them something. I don't know what to do. So if you think about the extension tasks beforehand, and you're aware of what's going on in that class, then it helps so much with staying calm and being connected to them as you go. So when your students don't start with a task straight after you give them the instructions, what do you generally think is the reason why? I'm very, very interested to know, because I think it happens quite a lot. And I'm not always sure like why. It's quite an interesting phenomenon to me, especially I think at EF Cape Town where we have exclusively adult students. And to me it was like, okay, so if I tell you, okay, let's go, you use your CCQs, you use your ICQs, they know what to do, and then they don't stop, they just kind of sit there, or they go on their phones immediately, or they just chat to each other. I'm quite interested to see what you think. So I'm going to share the Menti screen again over here. Nice. So they are distracted, lack of clarity. They don't want to learn English. They aren't interested, lack of responsibility. Instruction might not be clear enough, lost interest, didn't have motivation, processing, trying to understand. Usually the same issue of instructions, or demotivated. Instructions are unclear, too difficult. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of similar comments in the Zoom chat here. They didn't understand, they're not interested, not focused. Maybe they're deep in thought and they didn't hear everything. Procrastination, yes, definitely, very, very much. Busy with maybe each other, like chatting a little bit. I have a few students that procrastinate quite a lot, but I procrastinate too sometimes, so I try and give them the benefit of the doubt when I have like 2 minutes of lesson plan to spare. Fear of failure, definitely didn't understand the question. So I think we all have a very good understanding of what's going on when students don't always start right away. And I think this is key to managing your class well, is this understanding. So I would like to introduce you to 3 of the students from my current class at EF Cape Town. I'm going to play you their reasons for not starting right away when they get a task. And I promise you, this is absolutely honest answers. I did not prompt them at all to say what they said. I just asked them to send me a video with what they wanted to, with what they think. And as you listen, keep in mind that these are all 3 of them are in the same class. So let's hear Leo first. Now I can't see my mouse. There we go. Put the sound up.
Okay. When I got stuck on a question, when we have a lesson, it's not because I don't know the vocabulary or something like that. It's always because I don't understand the task. Because if I know what I should do, I always try, even if it's difficult. But if I don't understand what I should do, I can not do anything.
Okay, so that was Mr. Leo, one of the most wonderful and dedicated students I've ever had. And this is Omar. He's a bit of a jokester, he's the class clown. He always, makes it a very relaxing atmosphere for all the newbies.
Because sometimes I'd like to make sure if I understand clearly or not. So sometimes I don't like to do the activities directly. I want to take a moment to make sure if I understand or not.
Okay, so that's Omar. And then over here we have Iki. Now, Iki, I think he's 62 years old. He's a retired engineer from Germany. He describes himself as the grandfather of the classroom, which he very much is not. He is the life of the party. But here you can hear his thoughts.
Well, actually, I do hesitate sometimes to answer straight away. And I think it's because a double challenge for me. So first, I have to think about the task the teacher has given to us. And second, I have to do that in a foreign language. That means I'm always searching for the right words, for the correct grammar, and so on. So the reason for my reluctance is not that I'm shy or unmotivated. It's just the fact that I'm slower than in my mother language.
Yeah. So I think this is one of the key things for me is that they sometimes they struggle to get started. They stop halfway through just simply because there's a cognitive barrier. They don't know what to do. They might even know what to do at the start, but then halfway through, they kind of lose it a little bit. And by having this awareness, it helps us manage it actively as it happens. I think many times that I've spoken to teachers about this, I think it depends on how tired you are on the day. I'm seeing here Eki is very German. Yes, he really is. But it's very easy to assume that students are not motivated or disinterested or not engaged or they feel shy. But and I'm saying that there certainly are very many students for who this is the case. But for the majority of them that are there for learning English because they need to achieve a goal, they are not going to be deliberate with this whole thing. They're not going to sit there and procrastinate on purpose just to irritate you or to drag out your lesson pace. So I think one of the most important things for me in managing a mixed ability classroom really is the monitoring. Monitoring for me is not walking up and down like a drill sergeant, stomping your feet, making them feel nervous and anxious and scared, not interrupting their tasks and saying, okay, do you have a question? Are you okay? And distracting everyone around them. Monitoring is simply being there with them in that moment, being there, them feeling that you're there. They need to know that you see, like, okay, these guys are finishing a bit quicker. What do they need to continue? The other ones who are a bit slower need to know that, like, it's okay for them to be slower because you'll notice. You'll notice they are, and you'll go and support them. So whenever I give them a task and some of them don't start right away or they just stop, all I do is I just go there and I'm like, are you okay? How are you doing? How are you doing? Like, let's check some of the answers you already have. Very quietly, just with that one student, because sometimes it's not even that they don't know what to do. They just need a bit of a confidence boost. But it doesn't need to involve anyone else in that class. And I think just being there and them knowing that you're there with them, you're in the trenches, you're learning with them, goes such a far way in kind of managing your energy and their energy as the class progresses. So when we monitor, we need to monitor for access. Can they access the concepts we need them to do this task? Who is stuck? Who is silent? Who is rushing? Who is dominating? What can I do to manage this to keep my lesson on pace, not lose time, not move forward, and still support them in the way they need to be supported? Do they have enough support? Do they have too much? Do they need to maybe go do something by themselves? So monitoring is a tool to adjust your support in real time. To me, monitoring really is one of the absolute most fundamental teaching tools we have. Because when you are there with them and they feel it, they trust you. And when they trust you, I mean, they will literally do whatever you need them to do. But establishing that trust is helping them feel that you're there. You're not just here in the back on some pedestal doing whatever you do on your computer there, busy with your lesson plans here. And I mean, sometimes we do this. Part of monitoring is also stepping back when you need to, letting them do their thing. But you're still focused on them all the time. When you have that focus, when they trust you, you have space to change and adapt as you need to, as these difficult situations with different abilities, levels, skills come up. So I think this to me leads into what does it mean to do this sustainably? How do you differentiate sustainably? How do you lesson plan sustainably? How do you monitor sustainably so that you don't burn out, especially if you have a big teaching load with many classes, many levels? So it should definitely be manageable and not overwhelming. To me, that is a fundamental thing. With our teachers at EF Cape Town, like when we have new teachers who join and we're, onboarding them and giving them all the information they need, we always tell them the most important thing to us as the teacher managers is ensuring that they can go into a class and teach and enjoy what they do. Everything around them needs to help them have that access to the students, have that presence, have that energy, have that focus. Everything around that should help them get there, right? They don't need to do 3 different lesson plans for one single class. They can look at making smaller adjustments to spare their energy, to be there with the students. They can establish routines that work, that are functional for the class in front of you, being mindful that what works for one won't necessarily work for another. But if you have a structured class, if you have a structured framework that you use from the very start and you set that minimum expectation for them, they will fall into that, and that will become the thing that stabilizes them the very, very most. In my class, they know, for example, that like if they don't do homework, it's the most ridiculous thing in the world, I promise you. They are all adults, but if they don't do their homework, they just don't come in. They sit outside, whether it's in the passage, whether it's at, in the garden, wherever, and they finish their homework and then they come back in, and it's the biggest joke. It is not a serious, like, why didn't you do your homework kind of thing. It's such a warm and fun atmosphere because they know they should have done it. They know they can't come in because we are moving on without them. I'm not stopping for them, but there are students who did do the homework and they are my priority right now, right? So please go do the homework and then come back. And then, of course, I'll check it with you. That is the structure we use. And I mean, I've been with this class for almost 3 months now. And, the other day I sent more than half of them out. It was hilarious, but they did it. No complaints, no issues. I think they all went out the night before, to be honest, but, that's not my problem. So they all went out. And then when they came back, they did it together. They sat outside, they did it together, they learned together. So it's still a learning opportunity for them, but that structure is there. When you have that structure to fall back on, that also helps build that trust and security in each other, and they trust, what you're doing with them, even if they don't always understand what you want to do and why, but they'll go along with it because they know what to expect. There's not going to be any weird, difficult, negative surprises that's going to make them wobble in their confidence, So I think, the slide looks a little bit weird. Sorry about that. I did a little bit of research to just check how many people feel stressed with planning. And the OECD TALIS report that was done last year showed that 3 in 10 teachers feel very stressed with their admin, specifically lesson planning. And you can go into it. There's a lot of statistics and stuff, but one of the biggest reasons for it is because we overcomplicate unnecessarily. We overdo. We want to do too much. We want to give supplementary stuff. We want to, get new books, find this, find that, get a lesson plan online. It's too much. It's too much. Just like we have 1 or 2 aims that focus our lesson, we need to have 1 or 2 things we do in that class, and we use what we have to challenge them. Language is everywhere. It's all around us. We don't need to print another topic or another task for them to do in that class. Let them write a sentence, let them speak to a partner, let them make a little project, let them use what they've learned to challenge them more, but you don't have to overdo it. You really don't. It's not sustainable. So now I think I've spoken for quite a long time. I would like to hear from you before we sign off for today. And just like to know what tools and techniques and methods have worked well for you in the past. Because I think as we've seen, we all kind of share the same situation. We all know what's going on in all the different classes all over the world. I think I love that the most about these webinars is everyone is from all over, but we share this experience. So what works for you? Here we have follow-up questions. Very, very good. Follow-up questions, definitely. PowerPoints, presentations, definitely. Pyramids, definitely. Also very, very good. Have a weak one read and a stronger one answer. That's brilliant. I really love that. Scaffolding, multi-level tasks, gamification, 100%. I play this game where I make them like rush to press a little bell. And if they get it wrong, they get minus points. Yesterday, I gave one pair minus 700 because they pressed the bell too soon. And then another pair did something else. And then I just moved the minus 700 to them because it's my class, it's my rules. And they love it. They absolutely love it, But they got the concept at the end of the day. Flipping the classroom, a ladder map, that's all brilliant, yeah. Different style presentations, different sentences, shorter to longer, blended learning, jigsaw puzzles, games. So I think we have such a wealth of knowledge between us, Thank you so much for sharing all of that. That's really brilliant to know. So I think for me, the key takeaways here is that a successful multi-level class is not the one where everyone does the same thing, and where we have the same expectation of everyone and the same requirement of everyone in that class. Success means that learners can enter a task, participate and make progress. That's the goal. They just need to make progress. They just need to understand. And good multi-level teaching balances challenges, support, and structure. It's a balance, right? And we figure that out by having time and space and energy to think about it, not by frantically just doing more. It's very much about doing less. To me, the aim is access and engagement, not identical performance. And by using tools that you can use practically and immediately on the go. So these are just my ideas and the things that's worked for me. And it's been really lovely to share this time with you. Thank you very, very much for coming along and for participating so actively. I really appreciate all the input and everything that you've shared. It's amazing. I'm going to collect all of this. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to hand back over to Eleonora and Michaela right now. Have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariet. Thank you for having guided us through such an important topic. The teachers were super engaged and your passion was incredible. Thank you. If you can move to the next slide, I will quickly go through some of the opportunities that teachers can take in collaborating with EF before sharing the quiz in the chat. You can test your student for free with the EF set, which is a certification, which is a test benchmark on the CFR certification. They will get an official certificate and your school will also receive a detailed report. And to inspire your students, you can even take them abroad with a language trip and through an experiential learning, thanks to our offering throughout more than 50 destinations around the world. And finally, to keep boosting your teaching skills through these webinars and resources, materials, you can visit our Teacher Zone website to download all resources for your classes. And moving to the next slide, we want to keep hearing from you to make this platform better and better. If you have 5 minutes, you can scan this QR code, give us your inputs, and to make us understand what we can do better to support you through your teaching journey. And now, finally, we are also on Instagram. I'm gonna share in the chat quickly our Instagram profile where you can see updates and upcoming webinars. And you will receive the recording of this class tomorrow by email, along with the quiz, which now I will be also sharing in the chat. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. I will keep this the Zoom chat open so you can click on the quiz link. Thank you again, Mariet, for this webinar. And I'll see you, everyone, at the next webinar.